What is up, everybody? I'm NoLucksGiven here with your afternoon snap, and today I'm here with the Young Avengers developer update to talk about this season's newest cards in Marvel Snap. This is the August 2024 season, and I'm gonna go over it from the perspective of a free-to-play player. So first up, we have Kate Bishop, this season's season pass card, so you won't be able to get this as a free-to-play player, but I did still want to talk about it and share my thoughts. And then I'm also going to share my thoughts on Gwenpool, which is now available to free-to-play players for the first time. So Kate Bishop, though, let's talk on her first. On reveal, add 2 arrows to your hand. What the heck does that mean? Well, there are a variety of different arrows that she can pick up, and the video should showcase those in just a moment here. She's pretty similar in this way to like Snowguard. I think that's probably the clearest comparison, though I think Nico could also be a pretty apt comparison because there's like a variety of different things that she can do, but there's some RNG on whether or not you'll be able to do the specific things that you want to do, but there are some ways that you could build around her and get more out of that RNG element. So unlike Snowguard, you can't use Quinjet to reduce the cost of the arrows. All of the arrows cost 1. The first arrows are both 1/1, and then Acid Arrow is a 1 -2, and Grapple Arrow is actually a 1/3. This one comes with some stats, but the different arrows, you don't get to choose which one you get. You just wind up getting 2 of them, and like I said, you can't reduce them with Quinjet, but you can reduce their cost with Beast. You can make them cost 0 with Beast, which is really good, and I think that's going to be the main, it's at least going to be the first place that everybody looks with Kate, because you can also use Beast to bounce Kate, which is just going to allow you to get a lot of value, adding more arrows and potentially getting more value out of the arrows that you've already played as well. So that is probably the first home for her, and Bounce is already a fringe playable deck that actually has a lot of fans, especially for some high up players, because there's a lot of decisions to be made and just good ways to like throw your priority and control the pace of the game in that way that keeps your opponents unknowing of exactly what your power output is going to be. So a lot of good players like Bounce for good reason, and a good card making that deck a little bit stronger, I think, is going to mean that Kate Bishop is in the, I don't want to say like, she's not going to be the best season pass card, but I think she's going to be up there. And I would put her, if you want to compare her to another season pass card, the first one that comes to my mind is Baron Zemo, which we had a few seasons ago, because Baron Zemo really propelled an archetype. Actually, Baron Zemo completely created a new archetype, to be totally honest. Hawkeye, I don't think is going to do that, but she is going to take Bounce further and I think make it pretty strong, and potentially like a similar way that Blink did, which feels like a bad example because Blink doesn't see that much play now, but Blink did see a lot of play during its season. So I think that that is a pretty fair comparison. And the thing that makes her quite good in Bounce deck specifically is the basic arrow. The basic arrow is just Hawkeye, really. Sorry, meant to pause it on the basic arrow, but the basic arrow is also a 1/1. Oh, this is not pausing. Why is this not pausing? Do I keep double clicking? Probably. Okay, it's running a little slow while I'm recording here on my computer, but the basic arrow is a 1/1, and it's the same text as Hawkeye, and that is already a card that Bounce decks will play, right? So getting an additional copy of Hawkeye, and even though you only get the basic arrow 50% of the time, when you don't, you can use Beast, and you could also use cards like Grandmaster potentially to re-trigger Kate Bishop, and those same cards also synergize with at the very least, the basic arrow. The acid arrow isn't going to be like as synergistic. Beast is actually very good against the acid arrow because you return it to your hand and then replay it, and then it switches sides to your opponent. So that's interesting, but yeah, Beast is kind of like a good tech card against this new card, so that's still a good incentive to play it. Grapple arrow you don't get that much out of, but still interesting. And then Pim arrow, this one isn't really worth building around, but still a free Ant-Man is good. And I think especially the fact that you're going to have Kate Bishop, you're going to have another arrow. The Pim arrow is going to be really easily satisfied with this ongoing ability that I think will the Kate Bishop is going to be good. That's what I'm getting at here for the review of each of these arrows. So I do think that it is going to be a card that is worth getting after this season. Dang, this pause is just not working while I'm recording. That's fine. No more playing and pausing. I do think the Kate Bishop is going to be a card worth getting after this season. I don't think that Gwenpool is in that same category of season pass cards. I think that Gwenpool was good and it was fun. Honestly, I did not really even play it that much. I got a free season pass from Marvel as a official content creator, and I really just played Gwenpool for the weekend missions, and honestly, I maybe didn't give it too fair of a shot. I usually just threw it into RSM lists and won otherwise while not really noticing it, because that is, I'm just having more fun playing RSM than playing anything else in Marvel Snap. But I don't think that Gwenpool is like something that you need for most of the decks playing her, and the decks that do need her, I don't think are like particularly well. And I'm talking like Galactus combo decks and weird silly things like that. And when I say decks that play her don't necessarily need her, then I'm talking about like Silver Surfer decks. Those decks don't really need Gwenpool, so I think that she is definitely a skip. But Kate Bishop might be on the other side of that. Kate Bishop might be a card that next season you might want to pick it up for 6k tokens. We'll see. We'll have a month to play with her and really see how she does. But I kind of have to talk about Kate Bishop in this video because a lot of the cards coming out this season synergize really, really well with Kate. Releasing alongside Kate Bishop, we have Marvel Boy, who I think is competing with Kate Bishop for best card this season. So 3-2, after each turn, give 3 of your 1-cost cards plus 1 power. So if you play this on turn 3 and get to activate it for 3 cards on turns 3, 4, 5, and 6, we won't talk about turn 7, just turns 3, 4, 5, and 6, then that is 12 additional power, which means this is a 314. Quite strong. There are definitely some downsides. Killmonger is the first one that comes to mind. However, Kyera, I think, is going to be a big friend to Marvel Boy. We'll just put it like that. And even if you play Marvel Boy on the final turn of the game, it's a 3-5. That's pretty dang good. So I do think that Marvel Boy is worth picking up, probably. But where things get tricky is Marvel Boy is obviously really, really good with Kate Bishop, who generates 2 1-cost cards. So you might feel like you're missing out a little bit, picking up Marvel Boy and not having Kate Bishop. And the combination of the two of them, I think, is also potentially why I'm saying you might want to pick up Kate Bishop as soon as this season ends if you're a free-to-play player, so that way you can play with this Marvel Boy deck. Now, Marvel Boy is not necessarily going to go in the bounce decks, though it could. There is some anti-synergy there because when you bounce your cards, then they're not in play to receive the additional 1 power, and The bounce decks also don't typically find room for Kyera, which I think if you're leaning this heavily onto 1-cost cards and you want to have them in play the entire game and you want to grow them, which means you're going to be taking priority, you're going to get Killmongered. So I think that is definitely something to be mindful of with how you build your Marvel Boy decks. But I do think that this is a very, very good card, and I think has to be my pick of the season. I'm definitely getting Marvel Boy. I think that it is the best card this season, and I don't want to not have it. It is just stats, right? It's not any type of interaction. It's not like disruption or anything like that. So I don't think that it is a must-have in any case, but I think that it is going to be very, very good. And I brought up, what's her name? Kate Bishop, already forgetting her name, but I brought up Kate Bishop making the bounce decks better. And I brought up Baron Zemo, which is definitely a better comparison. Baron Zemo took those mill decks from not even an archetype to suddenly something you could actually play. I think Marvel Boy is going to do the same thing for blue Zoo decks or Kazoo decks with Kazar and Blue Marvel. But now I don't know if you play either of those cards. I don't know if you play Kazar or Blue Marvel or Gilgamesh. I think you definitely start with Marvel Boy though, and you probably throw Kate in there because she has some nice synergy. So that is definitely just my recommendation for the season. I do want to say on this subject, because last season I recommended, well, I said Cassandra was my pick for best card of the season, but I said if you're going to buy one card, go Copycat. I think I was proven right in that, but I will say, the season starting today, you don't have to buy Marvel Boy today, especially if you are a free-to-play player. Do not buy Marvel Boy today because you're not going to have Kate Bishop today anyway. So wait it out a little bit, see what people are saying, and before the end of the weekend, then consider buying Marvel Boy. You do want to buy him the end of the weekend, of course. Use your spotlight keys and grab those weekend missions. Make sure you have enough time to do those weekend missions, but it's typically like just win a few times with Marvel Boy, which shouldn't be too hard. You can just throw them in your RHM decks if you don't have Kate Bishop. But I just bring that up to say, if you are a free-to-play player, I always think, I don't think anybody that bought Copycat on my recommendation as soon as it dropped last season are disappointed, but I'm just prefacing, I'm just covering my bases here. Wait until you get more information if you are really looking to make the most of your resources as a free-to-play player. The next card coming out this season is Wiccan. On reveal, if you've spent all your energy this game, +2 max energy. This card seems really, really cool. However, there is a big downside to this card. It is not an RSM card. Unfortunately, RSM decks just cannot guarantee with any type of consistency that they're going to be able to spend all of their energy in the opening turns of the game. Even outside of RSM decks, I don't know if this card is good. I think that this card is probably bad, but I think that it's cool. So the biggest difference between this card and Wave and what else do we got? I guess I'll throw Psylocke in there. Hope Summers, this is actually kind of closer to Hope Summers actually though. Basically, every card other than this that gives you additional energy is cheaper than Wiccan. Previously we saw Lockjaw as well. We do still have Jubilee as sort of an energy cheat that sees some play. But basically, I think that this card is kind of expensive. The fact that it is expensive is integral to its balance, because at 3 cost, not only is this card much stronger, if this was 3 cost and even only gave +1 energy, it's still much stronger because it would be much easier to spend all of your energy by the time you put this into play. That's the one synergy that this has with RHM, is RHM players can play this on turn 3, but it's still going to be too difficult to make sure you're spending all of your energy in those first 2 turns that it really doesn't matter. But non-RHM players have 2 options. I'll say 3 options. The first option, spend all of your energy on turns 1, 2, and 3. Pretty straightforward. Second option is going to be play Quicksilver, then play Domino, then play a 3-cost card. That is doable. That is possible. But I think it's worse than the first option, and I will say, so this card is also synergistic with Kate Bishop. In a way that it might not seem like it initially, I think that the best card with this is actually not Quicksilver, not Kate Bishop, but Maria Hill, which is a 1-cost card that gives you a 2-cost card. But I think that anything that generates cards like the Hood or Kate Bishop are going to be good with Wiccan because they just give you a flexible way to make sure that you're spending all of your energy. And then similarly, once you have this +2 max energy, you kind of need something to do with it. And the trick, if you are, so this is where the Quicksilver Domino strategy starts to gain a little bit of footing, because those decks would be able to play Quicksilver, Domino, some 3s, Wiccan, and then more expensive cards. Play more 3s, so that way on the final turns of the game, you can actually make use of this +2 max energy, because the cheap decks, if you just play a bunch of cheap cards in your deck, then you might run into a scenario where you're not really even making use of the max energy because you're just playing a bunch of cheap cards, and then you're kind of cheating yourself because you won't be able to use this ability because you're playing a bunch of like bad cards. So you're not really getting the most out of your energy in the end game. I will say, potentially the best card with Wiccan, turn 1, you gotta play something. It possibly could be Quicksilver. That is going to hurt your consistency otherwise though, because what you really want to do with Wiccan is turn 2 play Psylocke. If you can play a turn 2 Psylocke, that allows you to play a turn 3 Wiccan with all of your energy easily accounted for. Then on turn 4, you've got 6 energy. You can slam a Haymaker, you can slam Odin onto Wiccan. That seems super sweet. Otherwise, hang on to your Odin and play like Dr. Doom and then Odin later. You could also Arnim Zola your Wiccan. Sure, okay. Wiccan seems like a lot of fun. I think that it is going to be pretty cool in a lot of decks that I think are cool. I think that if you've spent all of your energy is a really tough thing to fill. So my official recommendation here is cool. I might pick it up for content, but if you are a free-to-play player trying to make the most of your resources, you have to make a decision. Do you want to go for the most powerful cards, or do you want to go for some fun cards that might entice you into playing more Marvel Snap, which is not a bad thing. I am all for picking up cards that you think are fun and will make you play more or encourage you to play more, rather than just picking up the cards that will allow you to win more. So hopefully I've kind of summarized all of my thoughts there with my recommendations for Wiccan. I'm definitely not saying skip, but I'm saying this thing is going to be more on the fun end of things rather than the competitive side. Next up, we've got Speed. Ongoing +1 power for each turn in which you spend all your energy. So I think that Speed suffers from the worst parts of Wiccan in that it's kind of tough to make it work, but also suffers from just not being that fun and not being that big of a payoff. It could be a 3-9 or, I mean, let's be honest, it's never going to be a 3-10. You're not going to spend all of your energy every single turn in a limbo game. That's just really tricky. I do want to say that, like, this card could still be good with specifically Kate Bishop, because those arrows are just flexible. They allow you to not only spend all your energy on turn 2 or turn 3 in the case of Wiccan, though for speed you'll probably just play speed on turn 3, but they just allow you to fill out your curve as you get into the later stages of the game. And I think for that reason, it will be a really good combo with speed. But is the juice worth the squeeze here? Is it actually worth it to try to build around speed and to play him, to put him in a slot in your deck? Because let's say you get half of the turns with speed. Let's even be generous. I think viewing this as a 3-6 is pretty good, because a lot of times it's not good to even spend your energy on turn 1, which isn't something that I really talked about with Wiccan, but like a lot of decks, like I'll bring up, it's not usually good to spend your energy on turn 1 in a variety of different decks, because you don't know enough about the locations, and that can often make it tricky to develop things early on in the game. Now, something like Nightcrawler or what else is like a good example? I guess, I don't know. There's some other cards that you can play on turn 1, but there's just some risk. That's all I'm saying. So if speed is if it's a 3-5, it's absolutely terrible. If it's a 3-6, half of your turns, you've spent all of your energy. Compare that to Nocturne or Copycat, which are 3-5s, or Loki. All of those are 3-5s, absolutely push, really incredible. And for just 1 less power, you're getting like a game-winning ability, draw a card, change a location, steal an ability, a game-breaking ability from your opponent's deck. It could even steal Speed's ability. All of those cards are just so much better than Speed, that I think that this card is really competing at that 3-cost slot. And all 3 of those cards that I just named are things that can get played in any deck. Any deck can play Loki, Nocturne, or Copycat. So speed, not so sure about. Yeah, kind of interesting. I think it would maybe have to get +2 power for each turn in which you've spent all of your energy, and maybe get knocked down to like a 3-2. But, or maybe even a 3-1. I don't know, but then Ravona's pumping it, so probably it needs to be a 3-2 with +2, and then it's quite strong. But for right now, I just don't think this is something you want to mess around with. If it's somewhere in between a 3-6 and a 3-9, like a 3-8 is playable, is good, but a lot of decks just don't spend all of their energy on every single turn. That winds up being really tough to do. I mean, a lot of decks can do it. Are those decks that want speed in them? I don't think so. I think that this is a great one where like maybe we can wait and see, but my prediction is that this card is going to be a skip, because the decks that want it, I think, will just prefer other cards. That's my final verdict. And now for the final card of this season, Emperor Hulkling. At the start of the game, copy the text of a random 6-cost card. Now, I don't actually have this information in front of me, but I did see that someone on Twitter did a really good breakdown of Hulkling, and I think that they, you know what, I am gonna look that up and pull that up. I couldn't actually find the infographic that someone had created, so I'm just gonna make my own and discuss what I think are good and bad cards for Emperor Hulkling. Here's all of the 6-cost cards currently in the game, plus Arshem and Death, which Hulkling cannot transform into. Of these, I think that these ones are all actively bad. Giganto's not that terrible. Agatha's obviously bad. Infinite and Destroyer are sometimes just like not even playable. And Thanos, I do believe, will start in your opening hand some of the time, at least, when Emperor Hulkling transforms into him, in the same way that sometimes Thanos starts in your opening hand when you are playing Arshem. So same thing can happen with Agatha as well, and then you are just playing a 6-11 Agatha. which is probably just enough of a drawback that you'd never want to touch Emperor Hulkling ever, and might be something that they have to address. But yeah, that is the biggest, like, these misses are so bad. Thanos isn't as bad as the rest of them, but the other misses are terrible. And I included Living Tribunal in this as well, because while Living Tribunal is sometimes an upside and could certainly be interesting in some decks, there are games where Living Tribunal will just lose you the game because you will have less. It's not good to spread out your power evenly when you are not making like a ridiculous amount of power. These cards, I think, are all basically, honestly, Magneto shouldn't really be in this tier, but I'll explain that one in just a second. Basically, if you get any of these, it's pretty comparable to just getting a 6'11 with no abilities. Sure, Heimdall can do stuff and can actually be tricky and pull off some interesting maneuvers. I do just think it's worse than some of the other things that you can wind up finding with Emperor Hulkling. And Magneto, I threw in this tier because you will actually get a 6'11 Magneto, which is worse than just playing Magneto. But Magneto is fine. But yeah, you do have that downside. Orca, you will just be playing exactly an Orca, which is not a card that people typically play, so kind of bad. And then the ongoing abilities and the discard abilities, I just don't think are generally going to be relevant in most games. However, you might have noticed that I have omitted both Hela. Oh, I did put Heimdall in one tier higher too. Okay, that means that I'm missing something. There was something else that I have not counted potentially, or I did my math wrong. Oh, I might have forgotten to put Mockingbird in the S tier, but we'll get to that in just a second. This is... Oh, I see what I missed. No, She-Hulk is here, Mockingbird is here. Okay, slight spoiler. What did I miss? Goliath I have. Oh, I missed Red Hulk. Oh, okay. I think Red Hulk could honestly probably go here in this tier. Yeah, that's fine. And Heimdall could go here too, because Heimdall could do some tricky stuff and be interesting. Red Hulk is just kind of an interesting card right now. We'll talk more about that in just a second when we look at spotlights. It's not seeing that much play because Mill isn't that good, because Arishem is everywhere, but Red Hulk is still okay against Arishem sometimes. But the other really interesting thing about Red Hulk is how it is terrible into Wiccan. It's actually fine into Wiccan, but it's terrible into the other new card coming out, whose name I already forgot. The one that we just looked at where you have to spend all your energy. Anyways, you get the point here. Why have I included Galactus and Hela in a tier better than those other cards that I said will rarely be relevant? Well, if you wanted to build a Galactus deck, or if you wanted to build a Hela deck, those are very specific strategies that rely on having your one-of card. And so just like the small chance that your Emperor Hulkling turns into Hela while you're playing Hela could actually be worthwhile. And especially in Hela, Emperor Hulkling is going to be a card that you can make use of in other situations as well. And Galactus, it's a pretty similar story, because you're either like every once in a while you are going to really luck out and get an 11 power Galactus Emperor Hulkling. That's going to be pretty sweet. I would like to get a clip of that for sure. And that will actually improve Galactus. And it improves Hela too, to have a 6'11, don't get me wrong. And in the games where Emperor Hulkling does not turn into Galactus specifically, it can still turn into relevant cards for a Galactus deck, like Goliath, like Blob or Null. We're going to look at those in just a second. So I think that it does have some utility inside of Galactus lists. Also, Sasquatch and Scar, I think, are pretty good homes for Galactus. You can see why maybe Heimdall does not deserve to be in this tier. these cards are all, they have pretty high upside for being Emperor Hulkling. Sasquatch, just making it like a little bit cheaper if you're not building around it, but Scar could be very good, especially if you are building a deck with other big things, which means you might also be playing Scar in a similar way that you'd be playing Galactus and Hela, because like Hulkling works with Scar. So it certainly works when it turns into Scar. So I think that all of those are good. And I think that all of these are great. Getting Arnim Zola, a 6'11 Arnim Zola, you can't always play around it, but it's great when you can. Blob, similar thing. Blob might not eat as much, but you're still looking at least a 620 or something, so that's great. Leader with Emperor Hulkling's ability is fantastic because you can be behind by a pretty considerable margin, win a location with Leader, and then you've won the game. So I think that that's very good. Null is one of the weaker cards here, but if your opponent Shang-Chi's something else, then you can Null and still get that value. Meant to bring that up with Scar as well, that like sometimes you just have like Monster Island or something, and then you get a cheaper young Hulkling just because it transformed into Scar. So that's why Scar could be pretty good. Mockingbird is just a fantastic card. A 6'11 Mockingbird, still fantastic. Doctor Doom and Ultron are great because they can impact multiple locations. And I also included Odin in this tier. I think that Odin is significantly more flexible than Onslaught and Spectrum. There are going to be times where Onslaught and Spectrum are fine, right? You use them to like pump up a Darkhawk, but I don't know, that's already good enough. Pump up an Iron Man, it's already good enough. So I think that Spectrum's a little bit better than Onslaught, but I think with Odin, there are some cards that really benefit from getting to do their on-reveal abilities again. So Odin can definitely be a really good hit. And I've also included She-Hulk here. That could maybe drop down a tier because it's really only great if you're also pairing it with like another She-Hulk. So that could be an interesting scenario to look at. But yeah, She-Hulk, okay, I'll knock that one down a tier. So then back to the chief card at hand. How does Emperor Hulkling shake out? I think that there are some really, really bad misses. There's some cool hits though, and there are also some really big high rolly hits that allow you to be like a leech, or a leader or a Doctor Doom, and impact multiple locations while also coming down as a 6'11. A little bit of like an Ultron feel to have Hulkling copy Leader or Doctor Doom, because Ultron is now a 6'8, really big and impactful in one location, but still adding some really relevant power to some other ones. So is it great? Certainly not. I think that it could, again, be a fun card for sure. But I think it will ultimately be just a little bit too random to do anything consistent with, and a little bit underpowered even, because turning into a random 6-cost card is almost as often a drawback or just irrelevant, and being a 6'11 means that it's worse than a few of the things that it could potentially just transform into. So yeah, I think that Hulkling is for now going to be a skim. And now skipping to the end of the video, we're going to look at the spotlight caches for this season. It's pretty low quality here because they were trying to make it look low quality, which is kind of lame, but to start off with, we've got Marvel Boy, best card of the season, probably alongside the two best supplement cards to pick up in both Blob and Red Hulk. I still think Blob is good post OTA. I don't know, there's a lot of good returning cards this season in Spotlight caches. So what's awkward about Blob and Red Hulk being alongside Marvel Boy is because these cards are so good, you should already have them. If you've been following my card to pick up each season, Red Hulk and Blob were both the picks of their season respectively, so putting them alongside this season's primary pickup is actually a little bit awkward, but it's great for players that haven't before. So definitely recommend spending Spotlight keys this week even more after seeing these. Moving on to Wiccan, we have two build-around cards in Pixie and Wiccan, and then a card that was once a build-around card but now is, I'm going to say, not a build-around card, though with an asterisk, because Loki is just a good card. I do think, like I was talking about earlier on in the video, there are some ways to build around Loki that I think are currently underexplored, and I might be looking at this season. I might put out a video titled like I don't know, I haven't come up with the title and thumbnail of it yet, but just playing like Loki alongside Grandmaster, Absorbing Man, Odin, interesting things like that to just try to trigger Loki as many times as possible and get additional value off that draw a card ability. I do think that all of these cards are strong and fun, and Loki is still strong. So going for Loki and like potentially picking up Wiccan, I think is fine. Here we have Jeff, the baby land shark, as a returning card. Jeff is still good, though certainly not as good as it once was, with now many people choosing to just put Nocturne in decks as kind of like a good flexible movement card. You've got Nocturne, you've got Vision, and there is sort of like a metagame in that, because if everybody's playing Jeff, then it makes a lot of sense to play Nocturne to like move into inaccessible locations. There are still some things that Jeff does. Primarily, the main thing that Jeff is doing right now is getting played on turn 6 after your opponent plays Sandman. Because Sandman limits players to 1 card per turn, but that does not stop you from playing Jeff. So you could play Iron Lad plus Jeff on the final turn of the game, and a lot of players are doing that right now. I think that Jeff is probably still a card that most people will want to have in their collection. I think that Iron Lad is still a really, really fun card. But I think that overall, these last 2 spotlights are probably skips. Emperor Hulkling, I don't think is that great. Nimrod is fun and interesting if you want to build around it, if you want to go down that route. Cannonball has not seen much play since the nerf of Professor X, still has seen some play, and I encourage you to check out my video of funny, lucky, and skilled moments this season for a really epic Cannonball moment. But other than that, I don't think that this is really worth spending your spotlight keys into. They're probably best worth saving for next season. But this week, I think this is a clear one. Just pick up all 3 of these cards, especially if you don't have them. And interesting here, we typically see, so my blanking. No, usually we would see, so we saw Hope Summers return to Spotlight Caches last season, right? Am I wrong on that? I think last season, Hope Summers was in Spotlight Caches, which means we should have had Baron Zemo in Spotlight Caches this season. And instead we just did not. So that's a little bit awkward for free-to-play players if, there's still Baron Zemo has never been in a Spotlight Cache. Hopefully we get him soon. I don't think that it's like super relevant to pick him up anymore because of Arishem kind of making him a lot less good. But I'd still like free players to at least have the chance to play with that card. And I think that's going to be it for me. I'm going to try to get this video out as soon as possible. So they are technically my pre-season predictions, but the season is probably live right now. Also live right now, I will give a little ad for my alliance. Come on and join the Never Lucky Gang. Still got plenty of room, and now is the perfect time to abandon ship and abandon your previous alliance as the new season resets. You can tell I'm not taking it like super seriously. I got to about 3,000. That's where it's going to stay. and we'll try again next week, next season, and but getting more people will help to get some of those rewards in. So if you want to help me and do that, but it's really just, I think, like a way for fans of the channel to have fun and be in a community together more than I'm taking it anything seriously in the current iteration, because it's a lot of grinding. This last week was your last chance to climb the ladder, your last chance to spend your conquest tickets, and your last chance to play like in the diner and all that stuff. So there was a lot going on for this first week of alliances. Maybe we will have better luck in some future seasons, and maybe you will be a part of that. But for today, that is going to be it for me for this video. Thank you guys very much for watching. I'm NoLucksGiven. Peace.